television. Hello and welcome to another edition of Time for a Slow Burn. My name is Jeff Roberts and I'll be your host for this series. In this series of programs we will discuss topics of interest to you, the viewers. The topics can be just about anything. Usually it's something that starts off as a television program, something we witnessed firsthand, and sometimes it's just a rumor. Well, I want to wish everyone a very, very happy New Year. As we begin this year of 2017, we are reminded of all the fun things we have seen in 2016, plus the bad things and the uglies during and throughout the year. One of the things that I found very interesting was the outcome of the general elections. Despite the protest and the whining from both sides of the political fence and the bluster, we have a result, despite ourselves. We actually do have a choice, or did have a choice, between a blowhard who insulted absolutely everyone he could during the election cycle, or a do-nothing, self-entitled fool who claimed credit for all, even when others did what she tried to take credit for, or just flat lied about it. She still can't pour pee out of a boot with the directions written on the heel, so the outcome of these elections was just a complete surprise to everyone, to say the least. Even and especially to the press, thankfully. The same raving lunatics that had Hillary Clinton crowned Queen of America at the start of the 2016 election cycle by a wide margin, according to the polls. The media engineered its way to give us the results they wanted. The American people thought differently and voted differently than the media could ever have foreseen. Only time will tell who actually won this election mess, the blowhard or the liar. But now we're stuck with the blowhard, who has never been elected to any sort of public office. This ought to be interesting. He's never run a successful business in his life that didn't end up filing for bankruptcy eventually, including his construction businesses, casino businesses, and, well, you name it. You get the idea. But let's take a moment, think back to the two previous elections. Why don't we set the Wayback Machine to the general election of 2008? Do you remember the tagline Obama had when he was campaigning? I do. It was hope and change. Well, how did all that hope and change go for you? It really did absolutely nothing, not a single thing for me. In fact, in the end of Obama's first term in office, I was much worse off financially than I'd ever been in my life. Health insurance premiums began to skyrocket, taxes went up, the cost of living expenses shot through the roof, and the entire American financial industry took a nosedive to the nearest sewer. When Obama took office in January 2009, the national debt was $10.6 trillion. By the end of his first term in office, the national debt had skyrocketed to a massive $17 trillion. When Obama leaves office this month, very soon, shortly, thank God, at the end of his second term, the national debt will be over $20 trillion. For those who are keeping score, that equates to a huge national debt that 43 presidents combined can accumulate together. Stated in simple terms, we have a national debt that can't be repaid. And one president alone is credited for that debt. He did so by spending policies and foolish, irresponsible fiscal behavior while in office. He did so by blatantly borrowing against the future of the United States and our children, our great-grandchildren, and our grandchildren. Obama has nearly destroyed all of our grandchildren's future by spending trillions of dollars on social programs, new presidential edicts, and little, if anything, on infrastructure. And his followers loved him for it. They got new freebies. Oh, joy. Guess what? Who's going to pay for all the food stamps? The largest welfare rolls in the history of the program. Yes, you guessed it. We, the American taxpayers, we're the ones who have to. And we still are, and will be for the next 2 generations. That's the legacy of the Obama administration. A massive national debt that cannot be paid off in my lifetime or that of my children's lifetime and possibly that of my grandchildren's lifetime. Now that the meat bag is headed out of office for good, we are left with the words of Michelle Obama, this opportunistic wife and practicing fool who just is about as naive as you can get, by the way. Well, she said this recently in an Oprah interview. How much more partisan can you get than Oprah? Anyway, the pretend First Lady stated, all hope is lost. Really? All hope is lost? You're just figuring that out now? Somebody's been living a sheltered life in the White House for far too long. Time to dump her. The American taxpayers are feeling the pinch and the pressure to repay the ridiculous spending flurries of the Obama administration that it has been engaged in for the past 8 years. Some of the expenditures have created additional borrowing just to pay the interest on the national debt. Little, if any, went off to pay off that debt. It just went for the interest. So my question is this. Where in the hell is the hope and change Obama promised us? How do you feel about that statement now? If you're like many Americans, you feel shortchanged. You feel as though you were lied to for 8 years of the Obama presidency and 2 years before that during the election cycle. Many feel cheated. It has been painful. Every time you look at your pay stub or bank statement, when you look at the increased cost of insurance premiums each year, that feeling gets much worse. But you have to deal with the stagnant wages and few to regain some of that lost income. Let's face it, if America gives in and pays $15 per hour as a minimum wage, that drives up the annual income, but it also puts you, the taxpayer, in the next higher tax bracket. And now you have to pay more for your health insurance and everything else you need to live on. And here's why I say that. Goods and services you're paying for were charged at the minimum wage rate. Now they cost you much more. In fact, you can't charge $6 for a Big Mac meal anymore, when it costs twice as much to make it. So if the minimum wage goes to $15 per hour, that Big Mac meal is going to cost you between $12 and $15 for each meal purchased. A gallon of milk at the grocery store will now cost you twice as much as you pay currently. The same for that pound of hamburger or package of pork chops. The prices will go up literally on everything, especially for a gallon of gas. I saw the result of the artificial price increases during the 1970s, and many of you remember that. It's going to happen again. Think about it. Who'll be paying $5 to $6 per gallon? We will see many vacation trips that you're willing to take. How many you're willing to take. Or when you have a family emergency and have to fly home. The cost of a round-trip ticket for one person right now averages $700 to my home state of Oregon. If the minimum wage goes up to $15 per hour, well, my ticket price just went over $1,400 to $1,500 for that very same round trip. And it's not because the ticket prices were affected directly, it's because of all the indirect cost increases. The bottom line here is, when wages go up, so do all the consumer prices. And that usually goes up farther and faster than the wages do. So you see a huge price increase in pricing for all goods and services prior to seeing any wage increase. When that happens, that usually signals the loss of small businesses. Franchises cut back on operations, and so do grocery stores. Begins to climb again as companies stop hiring efforts. They stop all efforts. Can you imagine? We would just get in line for a self-checkout with a LED sign that showed the average waiting time, just like at the DMV. Or, if you wanted to be checked out by a human, you'd have to collect a numbered ticket and get ready to check out when your number is called. Or it's to the back of the line for you. Well, I'm blowing things out of proportion. Or maybe you think that. Well, those who were around at the time just remember the gas lines way back in the 1970s. And it seems a bit more real. The near fistfights over who is going to get to pump 5 gallons of gas in their can, all because your car pickup ran out and you had to walk to the closest gas station and stand in line with cars. Or remember the closed signs after the station opened for only 4 hours per day. And how about all the promises of local government agencies made about new supplies being shipped in right away? The next day, the same lines waiting for gas, the same BS rationing pitch you got the day before. So my question once again is this: how do you feel about the promise of hope and change now? Don't you just feel warm and fuzzy inside? I know I don't. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
As a parent, I know one of the most important times to be with your children is when they aren't feeling well. That's when the love and comfort of a family is essential to a child's well-being. For many families, there's a place they can go to find the support they need.
Ronald McDonald House Charities programs provide that supportive environment so families can be together while their children are dealing with serious illnesses and undergoing treatment. It's a home away from home for families in need, giving them more time for hugs, kisses, and quiet moments together.
You can volunteer your time at a local Ronald McDonald House and help a family in need by cooking a meal or hosting a movie night. You can also drop your extra change in an RMHC canister.
These contributions, both large and small, help more than 10,000 families every day. Proof that a little help goes a long way. Today is a great day for all of us to show our support and help give families in need more time together.
To find out how you can get involved in your community, visit rmhc.org.
Welcome back. For our next topic, I have to admit, humans are pretty stupid. We get behind the wheel of the second most important financial investment of our lives and lose all common sense. During our recent snowfall, you might remember, way back in December, right after Christmas and even some before, I was driving to work on the I-94, as I usually do. It's about 5 a.m. in the morning. Now, I was almost to Racine when a fool in a black Dodge 1500 pickup come flying behind me. He slowed down for about 1 minute and then started flashing his lights at me. This jackass was doing about 85 to catch me. The speed limit's 70, but he felt the need to go much faster than everyone else. Around him, behind him, in front of him, get out of his way. All because he knew he was more important than everyone else currently on the road and needed to be somewhere faster than anyone around him. Now, I was in the middle lane and I had to slow down due to heavy traffic. The left lane was clogged, so was the right lane. I had nowhere to go, but somehow this moron managed to get around me, honking his horn and using his hand signals that told me something rude to go do with myself. Well, he tried the same thing with the car that was right in front of him, but this driver saw what happened to me, so he slowly hit the brakes and slowed down. Very much so, on purpose. The other drivers around us got wind of what was happening, and everyone seemed to converge around the pickup. Traffic was slowing down anyway, so it was the perfect excuse to box this guy in. And box him in they did. He was going nuts inside the cab of his pickup. He screamed out the window and flipped everyone off who was all around him, flashing his lights and waving at everyone to get out of his way and doing a single-finger communication. But, as if by miracle, what would appear but a set of blue flashing lights? Traffic parted ways for the state patrol car, and he got right behind the pickup, hit his siren briefly, and the pickup driver got the message. He began to slow down and move to the right lane. Then he pulled off to the side on the curb. The pickup was stopped halfway between the exits of Highway 12 and 20 on I-94 in Racine. So, here goes another happy motorist who gets his just desserts, just for being a Class A jerk. When you drive like a lunatic and you're going to get pulled over, especially when that same people you're driving around on the same route every day to and from work, someone will have the state police on speed dial, and they will report your erratic behavior. You can bet on it. This jackass got what he deserved, and hopefully the ticket will be high enough that he'll think twice about trying to drive like he's on the NASCAR circuit. Well, we all get in a hurry every once in a while, or we're late for an appointment, but at 5 a.m. in the morning, that's not happening. If you're in such a hurry, leave earlier, you idiot. During the cooling off period from the elections in November, there were several news stories regarding fake news. Everyone was up in arms about fake news. The reporters were whining about the elections and how fake news had affected Hillary Clinton's bid for the presidency, or how Donald Trump and the Russians had influenced the elections as they had turned out. There were a few of the stories that surfaced regarding fake news. There were many of these kind of stories. There weren't just a few. There were many. There were literally hundreds of fake news stories every day from both sides of the political fence. Well, here's a news flash for you. Fake news has been around for decades. Fake news has been practiced by supermarket tabloids for decades. And if anyone paid attention to that garbage. But, oh my, the major media outlets were screaming about fake news. And the social media outlets were screaming about fake news. So that must mean, wait for it, we have a problem with fake news, especially regarding the elections. And there you have it. Fake news is the most important, is so important that we can interrupt regularly scheduled commercials on TV just to tell you about fake news. And it has such a huge impact on our daily lives. Well, where was all this screaming and gnashing of teeth when Harry Reid, the Senate Majority Leader, that jackass, lied to the American media and told them Mitt Romney hadn't paid any taxes in over a decade? That was fake news. He lied, but the American media lapped it up, ran with the story, and Harry Reid got away with it. When challenged later, he told a reporter, he, meaning Mitt Romney, isn't in the White House, is he? The same thing previously happened when a story from a major media outlet was circulated that President George W. Bush didn't attend reserve duty training when he was scheduled. Instead of reporting for duty, he was elsewhere. One of the rumors was he was belly up at a local bar. The truth came out later during the presidential election campaign. President Bush was attending his reserve duty as scheduled. In fact, the future president was sitting in a military dentist chair getting work done on his teeth when he was supposed to be at a local bar. But fake news went on. The network underwent some fairly harsh criticism a little bit later. The reporter was eventually suspended from the news anchor desk, and everything seemed to fall by the wayside pretty quickly, along with the news network's credibility. There have been many other instances of fake news being passed off as real, not only by major news media outlets, but by social media and bloggers who maintain their own blogs and web pages. Radio shock jocks did that very same crappy drivel for decades, and everyone ate it up because it was on the radio, and you were shocked by the presentation, so it had to be true because it was trendy. A trendy way to discredit anyone you didn't like, and it had to be true. You couldn't make this stuff up, and you couldn't make anybody appear to be less admirable. All you had to do was spread some rumor or make up a story, and your followers would pass it along in social media like wildfire. So everyone heard it, everyone read it, and of course they believed it. It had to be true. Our local political process has been forever changed by Hillary Clinton and her private email server debacle. Now politicians are screaming about any sort of email indiscretion by any of their political foes. And the fake news pool just laps it up and passes it along to their network just because it's on the internet. It has to be true, right? Wrong answer. The supermarket tabloids have been selling their own brand of drivel and lies since before I was born. The majority of this crap is so far-fetched no one believed it anyway, but it's still out there, and a few cling to it as gospel. These fake news stories can be and are about anyone and everyone. If you're infamous for anything, you'll be a target for fake news. If you're famous for anything, you will be a target for fake news. Anyone running for political office will be a target for fake news. This is nothing new. Sadly, it's just no way to regulate fake news. The social media outlets can't reject fake news stories, even if the operators know the BS. It's all BS. All because fake news can't be stopped. If anyone wants to be hurtful, they can be, just by starting up a blog, and they can say just about anything they want, and it's nearly impossible to regulate, let alone trace back. Good luck with that, Facebook, since you're the one who started most of it. I say that because you can set up an account with any of the social networks, most of through a dummy email address or secondary email address server. Bounce the emails and blogs around from region to region, and you're in business. Thousands of real news stories aren't even discussed or even considered because the insatiable need to publish the outlandish. Real news is boring. Then along comes fake news, and we instantly have an audience ready, willing, and able to pass along any drivel you want to publish, just as long as it's way out in the weeds. The farther from the truth, the better. Way out in the weeds. Here's another example of what I mean. A few years ago, the French were a target of an intense criticism for their role in developing the so-called bomb-proof bunkers for Iraq and Saddam Hussein prior to the first Gulf War. There was a list of companies, many of which America used frequently, or you at least knew of them. The list was about 120 companies, and someone started a rumor on the internet that they were owned by the French and were being used to front cash for terrorist organizations and rogue governments like Iraq. Talk about fake news. The fools started the rumor, stating companies like Target, Air Liquid, and many others should be boycotted, especially since the French were supporting the horrors of the Saddam regime in Iraq. About a year later, these blogs and emails circulated about the hapless idiots that helped spread these rumors by forwarding them to their friends and throughout their networks. That's how fake news comes into being. The companies that were named as being owned and operated by the French were guilty of no crime whatsoever. Many of them were American companies, headquartered in the United States. Perfect example is Target. Its headquarters is in Minnesota, about as far from supporting terrorists as you can get. But these idiots started a malicious rumor, and everybody else picks up on them and spread them to their friends, and it just explodes from there. Grow up. Get a life. Shut off the emails for a while and stop using the internet as your only source of news. There are more reliable sources of news and information about your neighborhood, your community, and the state that you live in. Find out what other news sources are in your area, and you can tap into them for the current events and newsworthy stories. Stop believing all that crap on the internet. The supermarket tabloids, especially their fake news stories about alien abductions and how Elvis is still alive and living in Utah, and Princess Diana planned her own death months before the accident happened to escape from Charles. Give me a break. These are the kind of headlines we see every day in our grocery stores, on the internet, and in our emails. Some jackass with an axe to grind wants to discredit someone or something or just about anything because they can. It doesn't take much, just an imagination and access to the internet. And suddenly the bloggers and liars are producers of fake news. Time to shut down that cesspool and pull the plug on fake news once and for all.
This is the United States of America. You are totally free to express your political views. No one is going to tell you what you can say or how you can say it, right? But what if you thought you'd be audited by the IRS, or have your business boycotted, or even lose your job? Would you speak freely then? This isn't a hypothetical question. It's happening to Americans right now. It's what I call the intimidation game. The object of this very real game is to make political opponents pay a high price for expressing their opinions. It was a standard technique in the Jim Crow South in the 1950s. It was used by racist Southern Democrats to shut up black civil rights groups like the NAACP. And now these tactics have been revived and improved upon by today's Democratic Party and their allies on the progressive left. They want to shut up conservatives, just like racists once wanted to shut up blacks and their liberal supporters. They do it in three ways. First, they harass. Second, they investigate and prosecute. And third, they blackmail. Tactic number one, harass. They sic federal and state agencies and bureaucrats on their political enemies. Remember the IRS targeting scandal that began in 2010? That's when the IRS systematically denied or delayed nonprofit status to more than 400 citizen activist groups, almost all conservative. These groups, representing tens of thousands of Americans, clearly met the IRS's tax-exempt standards. But the IRS delay and denial made it impossible for these groups to raise or spend money during the 2012 presidential election. Had they been able to, would the election have turned out differently? We'll never know. Some of these groups are still waiting for their nonprofit approval. Democrats continue to claim the scandal was the result of some rogue IRS agents who didn't understand the law. Not true. We know from documents obtained through congressional investigations and the Freedom of Information Act that the IRS was taking its cue from powerful Democrats and their left-wing allies, like MoveOn.org. For example, Michigan Senator Carl Levin repeatedly pressured the agency to investigate conservative nonprofits. Meanwhile, in speeches, President Barack Obama warned about shadowy Tea Party groups. Lois Lerner, the head of the IRS's nonprofit division and a Democratic Party loyalist, took the hint. Tactic number 2, investigate and prosecute. In Wisconsin, Democrat prosecutors engaged in a bogus campaign finance investigation into conservative groups that had supported Wisconsin's Republican governor, Scott Walker. The prosecutors subpoenaed emails and financial records of the groups and its employees. They staged pre-dawn raids on the homes of Wisconsin conservatives, confiscating computers and correspondence. Then, they warned the victims of these phony investigations and terrorizing raids that they'd go to jail if they told anyone what was happening to them. It took the state Supreme Court to end this use of the government to suppress political opponents. But the message was sent by Democrats in Wisconsin. Cross us, and you will pay a steep price. Tactic number 3, blackmail. The American Legislative Exchange Council, also known as ALEC, is a nonprofit that is very good at getting free market legislation passed at the state level. It's supported by a number of corporate donors, Coca-Cola and Kraft once among them. In 2012, left-wing groups who have long hated ALEC had an idea. Target ALEC's corporate donors, threaten to run ads branding them as racists or climate deniers unless they pull their support. It worked. More than 100 major donors ended their funding. As if these 3 tactics weren't bad enough, the left has added a new weapon to its intimidation arsenal: forced disclosure of political donors. This is when the names of people who give money to a cause or a candidate are made public. Disclosure can be good when it lets citizens keep track of whose money may be influencing politicians. But it's bad when it's used to target and punish average Americans who make political donations. Left-wing activists in California used financial disclosure records to assemble a searchable map of every person who donated to California's Prop 8 campaign supporting traditional marriage. The donors on that list had their cars keyed, their windows broken, and their businesses flash mobbed. Some Prop 8 supporters even lost their jobs, most notably the CEO of Mozilla Firefox, Brendan Eich. So, how do we stop this intimidation? First, learn to recognize the left's bully tactics. They're not subtle. Second, be very wary of initiatives to increase financial disclosure. They sound good, but they're almost always just left-wing attempts to get new names of people to intimidate. And finally, we must fight back. They can only win if we let them. We can't let them. Our freedom depends on it. I'm Kimberly Strassel of the Wall Street Journal for Prager University.
Well, that's it for another edition of Time for a Slow Burn. Tune in next time for topics of interest that tend to burn your hide. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.
Are you camera shy but would like to get behind the scenes of the fun-filled world of television production? Then Kenosha TV just might be the place for you. Every week, your friends and neighbors on Kenosha TV create new programs. We always need people like you to help direct the shows, man the cameras, tweak the audio, and have a great time in producing programming for Kenosha viewers. No experience is necessary. Kenosha TV provides the training and equipment for you. For more information, give us a call or go to our website.
Thank you.